when we look at the history of mankind, progress always seems to be about thriving and about evolving, basically about getting better. With all the new technologies that we implemented throughout the centuries, with all the additional complexity that we brought to our societies, at least for me, it always seems to be all about serving mankind. And it was always for the greater good, to help us to become healthier, to live longer, to maybe even have more fun in life. That changed. We are now at a point where technological progress, the increase of our economies, and of course, the increase of us, of our sheer numbers, are about to threaten the very existence of humanity. I give you an example. Between the fall of the Roman Empire and Columbus sailing, it took 13 centuries to add 250 million people to the world's population. Now it takes just 4 years. When I was born in the early 70s, well, obviously, we had a population of around 4 billion people back then. In the 2000s, we had 6 billion. And I'm probably witnessing in my lifetime that we are going to break through 9 billion people. That is amazing. Population growth, though, is much, much higher in the developing world than in the developed. But I think that's not the problem. There are two things that are going on. The one, it's the population, but this is also about consumption. In terms of the impact on the planet, what's much more important is the growth in consumption levels. And these are far higher in our developed economies. The average person in the European Union consumes about 4 times of the resources of the average person in India. But it gets worse. The average person in the US even consumes 7 times as much. And this shouldn't be an excuse for us Europeans. Our world is in a crisis. Our economies are in a deep crisis mode right now because of COVID-19. We are in recessions all around the world. And that means our governments must invest to get us through this. Wouldn't this be an amazing moment in our history where we can now invest into a cleaner and more sustainable future and even create jobs while we're doing this? I give you some examples. How about retrofitting all of our old buildings? What about getting solar panels, solar cells on each and every roof in our cities? I mean, this is wasted space that we could use to produce clean and renewable energy. What about working on the public transport systems and investing into them that it just doesn't feel anymore like you're getting on a subway that was built in the 1920s. Well, most of them are that old. And unfortunately, they even look that old, and sometimes they even smell like they're from the 1920s. Imagine the amazing impact this would have on our economies if we get our production workers to help us work on a a new idea of low energy buildings, retrofitting them like I mentioned before, working on the public transport system, make mobility in our urban centers accessible and more affordable for each one of us. Mobility always was and always must be a human right. By investing into our public transport systems, by lowering the ticket prices, by making it more accessible, we will drive more people towards these ecosystems and infrastructures in our cities, which will help our urban areas, our city centers, to become more sustainable. We also need to start producing affordable food. We waste 40% of the food that gets produced. 40%! And unfortunately, most of it gets thrown away after it already landed on our plates. That is absolutely pure insanity. It means that products ran through the whole value chain. They were grown, they probably got their fair amount of chemicals. You had to harvest them. Sometimes they were even shipped and transported all around the globe. Maybe even wrapped in those plastic bags that are ultimately polluting our oceans. Just to get flushed down the drain or the toilet because our stuffed bellies send a signal to our brains to make us say sorry. That's it. I'm full. I can't eat all of this. And we have so many amazing examples. Think about vertical farming. We need more of those crazy ones that once Steve Jobs mentioned in his famous speech in 1997. The ones who see differently and are crazy enough to think that they can actually change the world. We need the best, truly the best of our engineers to show that sustainable economies can create profitable businesses. Because basically this will create the first wing beat of this green butterfly effect this world needs so urgently. We need you guys to prove to the world that this change starts right now. That it's a change for the good, for a more sustainable, a peaceful, and ultimately a healthy future for all of us. So, what are we waiting for? It's about each and every one of us to make sure that our governments put the right regulations in place, financially stimulate sustainable industries, and reward those who are willing to make a change, who are willing to transform. We need new priorities because there's so much to do on Earth, which is obviously the only planet we have for the foreseeable future. It truly is. Wouldn't it be amazing to see those scientists and engineers on the cover of the global business magazines that are solving the global energy or sustainable food chain problems here on Earth? But guess what we are doing? Instead, we cherish those who build rockets and talk about the evolutionary step of building a multi-planetary society. Flying to a planet that won't be habitable for thousands of years to come is probably the most ridiculous idea considering the problems we have to solve on Earth. A planet with breathable air, drinkable water, and almost 8 billion people who want to make a living. God damn it, forget about Mars. Let's fix Earth. There is no greater challenge for mankind. No bigger problem to be solved, and no other disaster that no one can hide from. And that's climate change. It affects all of us. If we change, if we are willing to change our behavior, we will write the biggest success story in our history. And that's saving this beautiful planet. Sustainability is no rocket science. It's much more important than this. Thank you.